Hi everybody. In today's video we're going to talk about why recovery rates for things like addiction, anxiety, and depression are so low. I'm not going to give you the definitive answer to that. There's a lot of reasons we could cite, but here's a key issue that doesn't get talked about enough. And that is, we anticipate, we look for some kind of process of healing. We have an expectation of what we should do or what healing should look like, what it should involve. And oftentimes that's not really what we need. And so because we're not happy with the solution that's given to us, we're hesitant to follow through. I thought about this in the last video that I did. I talked about a split list approach to dealing with anxiety, and I'll put a link to that video below here. And I made the comment there that one of the challenges in working with people to deal with anxiety that comes from having too many things to do and we're worried about how things are going to turn out. I have this great strategy for dealing with it, and it really works, but a lot of times people aren't willing to do it, and that's the issue. And that's definitely a big issue when it comes to recovery from addiction. And in the addiction community, you often hear this phrase, trust the process. People come into treatment centers, people start getting involved in recovery groups, and this message is emphasized so much because people tend to forget this. People tend to get ticked off because what they're being asked to do, what the recovery process involves, is things that they hadn't expected and things that they are kind of hesitant and frustrated about having to do. There's a great story in the Bible that illustrates this. It's the story of Naaman in the book of 2 Kings. Naaman is a military leader in a foreign country, and he has the incurable disease at that time of leprosy. And he's tried everything, nothing seems to work. And then someone tells him, well, you should go to see this prophet in Israel. His name is Elisha, and he can help you. And so there's a bunch of things that happen. I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version of the story. But he eventually makes his way to Elisha, the prophet Elisha, and he's this really powerful person, has a lot of this big entourage with him, a bunch of military people, warriors and stuff. They come to Elisha's place. Elisha doesn't even meet him. He doesn't even come out to see him personally. He sends one of his servants to go and give the Naaman instructions about how to find healing. And again, we could go into all the detail. Let's skip all that detail. But the bottom line is what Elisha tells Naaman to do is something that Naaman doesn't want to do. It's like, go wash yourself 7 times in this certain river. And he's like ticked off. He's like, I came all the way just for this. The prophet doesn't even come out to see me face to face. He doesn't do what I would expect him to do. I was thinking he would come and do some sort of ceremony over me. None of that happens. And so he's like, he doesn't even want to do it. He doesn't want to follow the instructions. And finally, one of his people in his entourage just begs him, just try it, just try it. Well, he does do what the prophet tells him to do. And then, of course, the healing happens. So, it's a great, they all lived happily ever after. But that same principle is what I just see so often in recovery. And in some of the work that I've been doing more recently with people dealing with other things like anxiety, dealing with stress, what you need to do is not always what you want to do. Now, there's an interesting thing. Generally, and I think this is a really helpful principle, generally, we have an instinct. We have a sense of what we need. There's a value in following our intuition a lot of times. Except, here's the exception, I think. When it comes to dealing with mental illness or mental health challenges like, again, addiction, depression, anxiety, for whatever reason, in that sphere, that sense of what we think should happen, what we expect, our intuition can lead us astray. And so, people will spend thousands of dollars going to treatment centers and be unwilling to do what they're told to do because they don't want to, because they feel like it's stupid or whatever. And it's really crazy, the resistance that we have to doing the very thing that we need to do. The psychologist Gerard Adler makes a great point about this in his book, Studies in Analytical Psychology. He says it happens only too often that the patient that comes to him for therapy, it happens only too often that the patient expects at the beginning of an analysis that the psychotherapist will, by some magical means, simply rid him of his symptoms without ever touching the rest of the structure of his life, with which he is quite satisfied. The analyst is only too often supposed to be a kind of medicine man who will make the symptoms disappear from the outside. The truth is that nobody can be cured unless he is prepared to accept the need for a more or less complete reorientation of his life. To put it in a nutshell, the healed person is not the original person minus a symptom, but a newly oriented person in whom, through the new orientation, the necessity for the symptom itself has disappeared. All right, so in other words, he says that when people come for therapy, they want to find healing or recovery from whatever the ailment or the problem is. And the reason that it often doesn't work is that they are expecting, or they want their life to more or less stay the same, but they want the problem, whatever it might be, they want that problem to be healed. Some time ago, I talked about this challenge for Christian people, and many Christian people will struggle with, I call it magical thinking, and that's where they just want God to magically fix whatever the problem is without them having to do anything. Well, this is kind of a secular version of magical thinking, where we want the doctor or the therapist or the recovery counselor or whatever to help us figure out or overcome whatever challenge. And so that at the end of the day, as Adler says, that we would be the exact same person minus the symptom. So that, like, let's say someone with anxiety, and someone might say, well, look, I want to overcome this anxiety, and I don't want, I want to be able to keep watching the same things on TV. I don't want to change my internet viewing habits. I don't want to change my social media habits. I don't want to change the people I hang around with. I don't want to change how I spend my time. I don't want to adopt any different habits that are going to take a lot of my time. I want to be all the same, my life to be all the same, except I want you to fix this little thing in my brain that makes me anxious. And that so often fails, because so often it's that combination of a lot of things happening in our lives. That's what has to change, and that's what, quote unquote, fixes the problem or enables us to work through that problem. And our desire, our sense of how recovery should happen, often gets in the way because our assumptions, our desires, our intuitions about what we think we need are often just wrong. So when it comes to recovery from things like addiction, depression, anxiety, find somebody who really knows what they're doing and trust the process. They very well might be challenging you to do something that you hadn't expected to do, maybe don't want to do. And maybe the solutions that they bring seem like they'd be way too simple or elementary to work. But trust the process, and you might be very surprised to find real healing. Hey, before I go, I want to give you a couple of invitations. So the first is, if you like the things that we talk about here, please subscribe to this channel. You can do that by clicking on the button below. The more subscribers that I get, there's a certain threshold that will enable me to do some marketing and customize this channel. So that would be great if you could do that. Subscribe and you'll get updates on these videos when they're added. We try to add one a week. And the second is, if you or someone you know is dealing with a struggle with addiction, I lead a group, an online coaching group, and the people who are part of this group are finding it really helpful. I think it's probably one of the best things that I do in terms of what really makes a difference for people in a long-term way. And so I want to invite you to be a part of this group. If you want to find out more about it, you can reach out to me on the contact page on my website, and I'll put that link below in the notes as well. So you can find out more about that and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon.